Welcome to Product Mastery Now, where we simplify the 7 knowledge areas for product mastery. These are the product management practices that elevate your career and help you also create products your customers will love. To see all 7 areas, simply go to productmasterynow.com and you'll find more details. I'm Chad McAllister, a product management professor, practitioner, and your host. Today, we're talking about the subject of lifecycle management, which is a topic covered in the innovation management knowledge area. And you'll learn what the phases of a product lifecycle are, how that lifecycle might be different for different sorts of products, like SaaS products versus hardware products, and also how you can better navigate the lifecycles for your products. Joining us is John Rovnan. He has an extensive background in new product development that spans marketing, engineering, verification, validation, and regulatory compliance, with deep experience in medical technologies. He was most recently a principal product manager at 𝐼SACA, a nonprofit organization helping IT professionals grow their skills in digital trust, and he's starting a new role as we speak, not to be revealed yet. John also has served in several roles for the Pittsburgh PDMA chapter, that's the Product Development Management Association, where the 7 knowledge areas come from. And he also served in one of those roles was the chapter president, among others. If you're listening to this podcast and you'd rather watch what's going on, simply go to our YouTube channel, do a search at YouTube for Product Mastery Now, and you'll find it. Also, we create a written detailed summary of everything we talk about, along with a 1-page action guide to help you put into action some of the key takeaways that John will share. To find those resources, go to productmasterynow.com/498. I'm so thankful you are listening to this podcast, and I fund this podcast by the training courses I provide for product managers and leaders to prepare for their next career step. There are 3 training programs. The first one is to help you become a more effective product manager. The second one is to help people move into leading innovation in their organization. And the third one is for senior leaders to learn how to better support product innovation. To prepare for your career growth and that of your organization, go to productmasterynow.com to get started. John, thanks so much for joining us.
Great to be here. Thanks for having me, Chad.
So we've both been associated with PDMA for a bit. You reminded me that we met a few years ago at the annual conference. That year it was in Florida. We have one coming up in St. Louis in September, and anyone that wants to check that out, I'll be there for sure. I think it's September 14th, I think it starts. Just go to pdma.org and you'll find details on that. But today we're going to talk about this thing of lifecycle management, right? And I think of the lifecycle as what happens after we introduce a project, right? So the product, the project gets made, makes the product for us, and then it's time to let customers know about this. And that's kind of that phase of introduction, and then hopefully we see growth in the marketplace. Over time, we see competitors take action. We call that maturity. They're coming in, and our growth is slowing down in the marketplace. Our sales are slowing down. And then at some point, we reach declining sales. And then finally, if we're smart, we'll retire the product from the marketplace and not make it available anymore. I say if we're smart, a lot of organizations don't do that step. But there's other ways to think about this life cycle. And you're involved in teaching this body of knowledge from PDMA to people. You do that through your chapter and other sources as well. And based on your experience and how you think about this, can you describe life cycle to us?
Yeah, so I think initially how you described it is where your head goes, right? So traditionally you had physical products that needed to kind of follow that sequence. And when I got into medical devices, that's what we did. And not only whether it's a physical device or software, it's the type of domain. So, you're much more constrained in regulated environments as far as what you can do once a product's launched. So even small updates and things like that in something like medical would look very different than in some other domain. So initially, yes, and we teach life cycle and innovation process as 2 separate classes for the PDMA body of knowledge workshops. But as you get into that, you start to see all this overlap in where the life cycle and the product development process start to become one when you get into software and SaaS, right? So it's interesting as far as how you manage things and how you do your job as a product manager, how you work with the organization, right, to manage your products, right? So you don't always have a big bang, right, launch like with physical products. You can kind of ease things out into the market. You can use the software itself as part of your research, right? Things like concierge MVPs and fake doors and things like that, just to gauge interest, right? You can have
Hmm.
people sign up for things, and you're now doing research with prototypes, so everything starts to get blurred, and it makes for a really interesting perspective and on how you do your job and how you need to kind of navigate things.
Yeah. Let's talk about that blurring a little bit. Most of my product work has been involved in new to the world sort of things, right? So the
Hmm.
truly new products in the sense they did not exist before. But most product managers are involved in making something better, right? Taking an existing product, moving it from the current version to the next version, which we also call new product development. It's just,
Hmm.
it's being built upon. It's new in that sense. And as you say, the what we think of as the process for making something new, that applies anywhere we happen to be, right? If it's the new insight, flash of lightning, we understand a customer problem that no one has solved before. We have a process to take that from an idea through a business case to developing a solution, right? And making it real for people. And then, as I described the life cycle, the phases of the life cycle, I started when that product is introduced to the market the first time. But we still have we have a process that underlines that because if we want to see growth, we're making some changes, overcoming that chasm problem that we usually run into. And
Hmm.
if we're in maturity and competitors are stealing our market share, we're making changes. We're still going through some sort of process to develop new, in air quotes here, product because we are doing new work to it. I don't know where you want to go with this next. I was thinking maybe an example might help us think through this some, or just kind of how you see the phases being applied and what those phases are.
Yeah, and so with those hardware products, you do have that sequence, right? So you can have some iteration in there and things like that, but those phases are pretty sequential. When you get to the software, right, you have all those things going in parallel, right? You have things that you're building, you have constant feedback from the field, from the sales team, from your customer service, from the research you're doing, right? And you're developing in parallel while they're actually developing features and things like that. And one of the challenges I hear from product managers and really gets to this confusion, right, with Agile and I'm a PO, but I don't have time to talk to people. I'm really mired in the backlog. And what is my role is how to juggle all this, right? So different organizations have different structures. So you might be the PO product, owner, and you're it. So you're writing stories and you're trying to keep ahead of the dev team and things like that. And
Mhm.
and the idea that you could spend days or hours talking to customers and recruiting customers, things like that, it's really not realistic, right? But for me, right, that feedback is core and foundational. So that's a huge difference, and that's a huge problem that I see where people are struggling to maintain those parallel paths where they're doing a lot of these stages at the same time.
Yeah, let's unwind that a little bit. Anyone that has been around product for a little bit, and if you listen to any kind of startup stories as well, we know this is important to be talking to customers. And most people that talk about this say 30% of your time, give or take, a third of your time, should be engaging customers. And the reality is, we're almost always way too busy, and that feels like a luxury, like to
Hmm.
actually be learning from our customers. So some organizations, I wouldn't say they throw their hands up, but they're not addressing that problem at all. And they push it off to another group. So I see sales sometimes taking that function, and product people, like you said, that like a product owner, they're just trying to do their best to respond to what sales wants and translate that into user stories or some other description of
Hmm.
capabilities needed for the team to build. What have you seen in trying, or what's been your experience to try to just manage that, maybe by dividing up the role or just thinking about it
Yeah.
differently? How do we help with this if we're not talking to customers?
Yeah, so I was spoiled when I started my career, right? Doing medical devices, we had a dedicated, whether it was 6 months, 9 months, right, period for doing voice of customers. And back then we were traveling all over the world or all over the country and doing
Mhm.
them in person. So that was my out of the gate experience, what I thought was normal. But one of the things we talk about in the PDMA class is what's it like in the real world? Like we're
Right.
throwing things up on the board here and showing you what theoretically something should look like. But you have to make decisions and deal with the resources you have as a product manager. And one company is going to be different than another company, and you might have UX researchers to help you. You may not. You may have sales that some of those guys can be really insightful, or sales are just blasting you with, we have to have this feature. And it's very self-interested, because if you give them that feature, maybe they're going to land a big deal. So I think the best way to do it is to use all your channels, right? So maybe you have time, but you can plan time a couple weeks from now and schedule maybe 5 dedicated interviews, like what we would think of proper VOC one-on-one type interviews. But there's no reason you can't just be a fly on the wall for sales calls, talk to customer service, and listen in, and just bring all those things in, leverage your SMEs if you have them. And that's, I think, where product manager is going to really earn their money, is you've got all these disparate channels of feedback, and you need to align it with your goals and your vision for the product. You can't just accumulate a list of 1,000 product requests, right? There has to be something that you're weighing those against, and that has to be your product vision. So just using all those resources, and then being able to kind of sift through the signal, or the noise, to find the signal, and go from there.
Yeah, it's a great tip to use the resources you have. And I really want to pursue that for a moment, but I'll try to do it in the context of the life cycle here. There's so many paths we can go down. To use the tips, to leverage the resources you have, our ability as product people to gain somehow trust, to have rapport, to develop that with others is really key. Right. And I know one thing that helped me a lot in one of my roles was I became trusted by the sales team. And so I could couple, and they were encouraging this as well, right? It wasn't my brilliant idea. They were encouraging this. But I could couple customer interviews with furthering sales activity and making the salesperson trust me even more. Because they would see, I don't want to start advocating that product people need to be going out on sales calls all the time, because that messes up our role a little bit too. But we do need to have customer contact and understand the problem. So those customer interviews are essential for us. And you can have sales set those meetings up for you, and they get the benefit. They're seen by their customers bringing a value resource to them, because now the company wants to understand what the problems of the customer are. And as long as you have the relationship with the salespeople, that they understand this truly is not a sales call, this is for us to learn more deeply what the problem is, that works out really well. And I think it largely depends on the relationship you have with the salespeople.
Yeah, developing those partnerships is huge, and vice versa. When we do those formal VOC, right? Invite your marketing person, obviously your designer, maybe your tech lead, and things like that. Bring them in, make them part of that, and be organized, right? You don't want 5 people talking to the customer on a Zoom call, right? But I'm the lead interviewer, and you guys are going to be over here, and with Zoom, you can be shooting messages back and forth, like, hey, ask them this, or just say, hey guys, does anybody have any follow-ups here? I'll pause for a second, right? Getting people involved and making them part of it is so much more powerful and efficient than saying, I'm the product manager, here's what you're going to do, and it's coming from me, and making it very transactional.
Yeah, absolutely. If you can have part of the development team involved in those activities, there's less translation errors that occur, right? They get to hear from the user firsthand, kind of the description of the problem, which is great. So tying this back to Lifecycle, these are the things we care about. As you said in your example there, doing the medical device work, if you were doing 6-7 months of VOC on the front end, that clearly takes place pre-development. But we're also doing it all throughout the life cycle. Like when we're starting to see a little uptick in sales growth, or we're trying to get that after we introduce the product, and we can't quite get over the chasm yet to maybe our first core niche of a market we're trying to get after. We're looking at feedback from customers to understand what to do next. And if that's all we're doing is just taking requests from customers and features to put in, that might help us down the path. Maybe we get lucky and that's exactly what we need to do, but it doesn't really help us understand the problem more deeply. So we still have the same need to be analyzing what the customer's problem actually is.
Yeah, and the threshold for making a change in something like a medical device is very high, right? So you really need to be hearing it from a lot of people, and really those requests really should just be the start of the process. Right? Now you need to go and say, why am I hearing this so much? And do your due diligence. Like, why are they asking about this? And what are they trying to accomplish? That's the big thing. I'll go back to my last role, non-medical, with cybersecurity. I managed an enterprise platform for organizations to manage their cybersecurity posture, right? And your initial impression might be they need to know what to do and they need this and this, really. but they were struggling with trying to navigate the organization. So the reporting we had was not so much to show them what they were doing. It was for them to take it in their hand and communicate to people who were non-cybersecurity people. So until you start digging into that and understanding what the purpose is, right, whether you call it jobs to be done or whatever, but the true why, that's what gives you confidence to push things in one direction or the other.
Right. Okay. Continue on with Lifecycle. So if we're in the growth phase, that's where we're hoping to see rapid advancements in our market share increase and customers finding us, and we're doing a good job for them. And if we're doing a sufficiently good job, there's going to be some competitors that take notice and don't like having, if they're in the same marketplace, don't like having their market share decrease, or they see an opportunity, right, to do something that we're doing. And if they're doing it wisely, they're going to probably learn from what we've done. So take advantage of all that effort, like those months of VOC, right? And in some sense, copy aspects of our product. But if they're doing it wisely, also they're understanding the customer's problem. They're making what we did better. And that's when we're in the maturity phase where we see our sales slow down and customers choosing other options available to them instead of us. From your medical experience, what takes place at that point where you start seeing those sales decline and you want to take action to restore your market share position or somehow fend off the competitors?
Sure. And I think what we need to realize, and when we talk about software, it's a lot about introducing value in terms of features, right? We need to make sure that we're working with our marketing group, and we've talked about sales, right? Or the messaging that's getting to the customer, is it resonating with them? So all that VOC work we did, right, and said, this is where we're going, this is the value we think we're going to provide. Is that making it, to their front door? Is that what they're hearing? And so using all your channels, so you're in charge of pricing, or you have some influence over pricing. So there's things that are not in the feature bucket, right, that we should be doing as managers. Do you have good relationships with those hospitals? There's a lot of loyalty in healthcare in certain aspects, right? People use these things every day. One thing that stands out to me, and when we did voice a customer, you really want to look and find these like little nuggets. And it was a nurse, and we would capture these things in things called image diagrams, right? Just things that were like really powerful and stood out to us. And she said, man, when I can't get that injector set up, like the doctor comes in, he's ready to do procedure, and he's so mad, and I just feel like awful, right? So that resonates. So if you can build a product that's helping them do their job, right? So it's somewhat transparent, and they can feel like, hey, this is not impeding me from providing good patient care, right? You can establish a lot of loyalty that way, right? And then when you have your support staff there, because you have customer people and sales guys and girls in the hospitals themselves, right? Just maintaining that type of relationship, and that goes a long way.
Yeah, absolutely. The relationships matter. The people that you meet during the VOC work and capturing their words literally and their perspective and trying to respond to those needs. I should have been taking a note on this because you said something I want to ask you about a couple minutes ago, and I forget now exactly how you worded it, but it was in the sense if the knowledge that you learned from the VOC isn't making its way, I think maybe you said through the marketing door, that people are missing some aspects of this. Tell us more about what you meant by that.
So everybody kind of has that cynicism that people are trying to market this thing to me, right? It's marketing. I think in the real world, that only goes so far, right? If you don't have a solid value proposition and you don't really understand what you're trying to accomplish, right, with your product, what's the problem? What's your solution? How are they connected, right? Marketing people can't work magic without that. But if you have a very consistent and strong tie between that value proposition that you've discovered, right, the solution that you have in the middle, and the messaging you're sending out through marketing, through your sales, saying this is what we're trying to do for you. This is what we're trying to help you with. If it's real and if it's validated value proposition, that is going to resonate with potential customers, and you're gonna have credibility.
Yep. Good. So I assume we ended up where we did with that because of the regulatory environment. And what I mean is we're talking about maturity. How do we kind of defend from the competitor? And obvious options would be, well, we need to make the product better in some sense, and that can be software or hardware, at least in this context we're talking about. But either changes to either one of those means we have regulatory hurdles to go through, which is
Mm-hmm.
that becomes a much larger issue now because of the regulated industry.
Sure.
And the example you brought up, which I probably wouldn't even have thought about, is let's reevaluate how we're positioning the product to meet the needs of the customer and make sure we're communicating in a way that the customer recognizes we understand their problem, and this solution is the answer to their problem in a way that really creates enormous value for them.
Absolutely. Again, you're limited, and in the medical world and other world domains as
Right.
well, right? Credibility is usually important, right? You have
Yep.
highly paid doctors and your professional clinicians. You don't want to waste their time. You don't want them to think that you don't know what you're talking about. So it's very important.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, good. And I think this is a place where product managers can add great value, and it gets missed in organizations. And it sounds like in your experience, it may have been missed too, because the product team, the VOC work that gets done, product managers involved in that, and we come up with the key value propositions. That's what the design of the product is built around to answer those needs for the customer. And then by the time launch happens and there's a marketing group involved, what we learned from the VOC can get dropped from the marketing group, right? And that was gold that came up in the VOC effort.
Right.
And the marketing group just has positioned it maybe off instead of true north where we thought we were headed, right? We're a few degrees off of that. Or they're using words that the organization, that I have seen this one a lot, the organization turns the language that we learned in VOC into organizational speak. It's like, we don't want to say that just sounds too informal or something, right? And we kind of lose the effectiveness then of being able to connect with people that we actually understand the problem.
Right. And that goes back to bringing people into your team. Think about it as a product development team, and each person has different roles versus I'm just doing product management, right? So we can't leave marketing, right, to the end, right? They should be brought in early. Like I said, invite them to the voice of the customer, right, at the beginning. They don't have to be in every one, but maybe they're in readouts and things like that at the beginning.
Right.
So they're aware, right, of the path you're taking. And then maybe you're not good at marketing. Marketing's not my thing. So when I have my marketing resource, I'll tell them, hey, look, I'll give you this, and you're kind of driving the marketing thing. You tell me what you need. You tell me what you want to do, when you want to do it, and things like that. So bring them in and let them own it, but provide them what they need to be successful.
Okay, that makes sense. Okay. And the two other options there, the main option of we just want to make our product better when we're in that maturity phase to ward off the competitors. We need to be careful that we're not now copying the competitors, which don't put features in just because your competitors have them, because you're kind of guessing if they responded to an actual need or not, or if they're just adding features themselves. And so once again, understanding the customer's problem and their unmet needs at that point is really important so that we can do the smart thing and make our product better.
It is, and the cost of change to a physical device is a lot greater than to a software device, right? There's large companies that can deploy multiple versions of a feature, right? And within 24 hours or 48 hours, they have feedback because their user base is so enormous, and so they can run those little live experiments on a consistent basis, which is much different than with a hardware product.
Yep, exactly. If you've ever gone to Google to do a search and one day you go, wow, this doesn't look right. And
Right.
10 seconds later, you run another search. Oh, it's back. Right? It's like
Sure.
you got selected as the 0.001% of people that saw that UI. I do want to, so after maturity, if our product is not the shiny, bright one anymore, and there are better options in the marketplace, and we're, for whatever reasons, have chosen not to try to maintain our positioning to keep our product up, we're going to reach decline, see those sales decrease. And at some point, the effort to keep the product available is going to be much more expensive than just retiring it. And I don't know if you have any comments on retiring. I don't know if you've ever been in a situation where you actually had to retire a product, make it not available anymore.
Sure, I have, and it's a different activity, right? You're taking a product off the market, but some of the principles, all the principles of utilizing the team and communication apply, right? So whether we're going to pull this off the market in 2 years, how long are we going to support the products that are out there? How long can somebody keep them and expect to have spare parts and support
Mhm.
and things like that, right? But we now need to work with our communications team and our sales team and things like that, and procurement and that side of things, manufacturing, and say, okay, this is the plan, right? So you guys need to have a heads up, and is there anything that you see, right, that's wrong with this? And so you're doing the same thing backwards, but you need to, again, over communicate and over plan. And now you're probably rolling back into some kind of, are we going to replace this product or
Mhm.
with something similar, right? And so treat everything you've done up to this point as head start on your VOC for the next thing, right? You have learnings, right? What worked and what didn't, and why are we pulling it off the market? Maybe it's just you can't get parts or something like that, but maybe the market's moved and it's just not meeting the needs. But you do have that head start. So again, talking about utilizing every resource at your
Yeah.
disposal, right? Complaint histories and things like that. Start pulling those and getting them ready to move to the next thing.
Yeah, that's good. That's my key takeaway from our discussion, and for listeners as well, just to highlight that again, to make use of those resources we have, to leverage them. Usually the product person is the best connected person in the organization because we have the opportunity and the need to work with so many other functions.
Yeah.
And consequently, we're building those relationships and to take advantage of those resources to find out what we don't know. When we don't have time to get to customers ourselves, how else can we get that done? Marketing certainly has some industry or market type research that they probably buy as well. And there's a number of resources to just take advantage of.
Yeah.
So I like that. Thanks for sharing that one with us. Okay. Anything else on the life cycle we wanted to talk about? Because I'm going to ask you for an innovation quote here in a moment.
Yeah, no, that's good. I mean, as much as we like to get into process, right? And
Mm-hmm.
process is sequential, but I think that the key point about being a good product manager is to have a big toolkit, because you can't plan things out perfectly. Different organizations are going to function different ways. They're going to have different culture. You're going to have different resources. Like we talked about, it's like I'm planning on going from here to here, but I still have to drive the car, right? I
Mm-hmm.
still have
Right.
to make some adjustments and kind of read things, even though I know the path I generally want to take. And I think that's maybe an imperfect analogy, but that's your job, is to get everybody from point A to point B, and it may not
Right.
go exactly according to plan.
Yeah. Yeah, one of my manager's mentors, he liked the analogy where you're driving the car while changing the tires on it, and that's just what we have to do, right?
Sure.
It would just make things work as we get down the
Right.
road, and we think we know where we're going, but we don't always end up there. So
hmm
that's okay. Okay, an innovation quote. We do like innovation quotes around here. What do you have for us, and what does it mean to you?
Yeah, so in my early days as a product manager, my first round interviews after coming out of my first company, you kind of a little bit and you think a lot, right? So I got hit with a question during an interview. It said, "What's your definition of innovation?" And whatever answer I gave, it was pretty bad, I guess. But the interviewer said, "Look, I think innovation changes behavior." Right?
Hmm.
Very, very simple. And whether that's a perfect definition or the right definition, it stuck with me until now, because it just made me think, right, over time, about what innovation is and whether it changes behavior dramatically or enables different behavior, enables different things to happen, and really kind of breaking this down. And now I have this model, this creativity, invention, innovation kind of sequence where creativity is coming up with ideas, whether you can realize them or not, right? So like Da Vinci had very cool drawings, right? But he couldn't build those things, and nor would they work, right? And then you have invention, where you actually can, build something new and different. You've been sitting around with your friends and somebody like, nobody ever thought of that. We're gonna be rich. Just because it's new and nobody thought of it doesn't mean it's gonna work. And I always think of the segue. The two is something that fits in there because it was missing context. It's technologically, it's really cool, and it worked very well. But the idea of transforming kind of urban living, right, it just didn't emerge, right? You wasn't thinking about people living on the fifth floor without elevators in New York City, or where were you going to put these things when you went into a store, or there's 1,000 people on the sidewalk and you can't run over their feet, right? So that middle of invention, where we do create something, but it doesn't have the impact. And then finally, innovation, whether it's incremental or kind of big bang innovation, where it does create more possibilities or change our behavior for better or
Mhm.
worse, I guess.
Yep. I like the just the reasoning there that you went through on what elements of innovation are, that creativity, invention, right? Making something new of value available to people. And it came from a job interview. How did that job interview go in the end?
I did not pursue that. It was actually in like the cemetery domain, making headstones and caskets, and just wasn't really something. I couldn't see myself there.
Very good. Yeah, just thought we should probably ask to make sure we knew how that. The key characteristics I always think about what is innovation is that it's a process and we're creating value for someone. So that those things stand out always in my mind. And I like communicating that it's a process because that immediately tells us that's something you can learn, right? There's discrete steps that we go through. And this is one reason why I love the PDMA body of knowledge so much. It gives us lots of processes, tools, concepts to be aware of, and no one needs them all the time, right? But as you said earlier, to just be aware of what can be done at certain times is really helpful and can help us get out of problem situations and sticky places. So good information in that body of knowledge to learn more about. How can people find out more about you, John, more about what you're up to?
Basically, just my LinkedIn profile is pretty robust, and so that would be the best place.
Great. We will add that to the show notes. John, really delightful talking with you. Appreciate what you're doing there in Pittsburgh to help PDMA, and looking forward to the next adventure, which we know that you are in the midst of the transition now. And if people check out your LinkedIn profile, we'll probably find out what that is.
Back into healthcare, so it'll be great. So thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for talking about the life cycle phases and some process information too. And listeners, once again, if you want the written show notes of everything we discussed and that one-page action guide, simply go to productmasterynow.com/498. Keep innovating.
Thank you for listening to Product Mastery Now, where product leaders and managers gain product mastery through practical knowledge, influence, and confidence. By listening, you are becoming a product master, creating products customers love. Find additional resources at productmasterynow.com. Keep innovating.